This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police boost. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning. We also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 20th of May 2021 and I am Miss K.
I am too.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, bad day for UHURU in by-elections. In the Standard, UHURU Raila fury as Ruto celebrates. And in the Star, UHURU faces revolt as DP Ruto Raila win big.
Now, I have spent some time mulling over the political happenings over the past 1 week, and I'm convinced we are headed for a big clash in 2022. And this time round, the fight will be bigger than anything we've ever seen. And here is why. One, if the judiciary has already pronounced itself on BBI and sided with the deputy president, does it mean they will side with him in 2022? What if they overturn the people's will like Maraga did in 2017? How will the people react? How can the adjudicator show their bias 1 year before an election? Two, since when did KIKUYUS become stone throwers? A couple of months ago, they pelted Raila with stones in Roiro. During the same period, they stabbed each other in Kennel in Murang'a while chanting Hasora Nation. 2 young men died. And just recently, MPs led youths in causing fracas in the Juja by-election. Why are KIKUYUS fighting KIKUYUS? Are they under a spell? Have you had anyone in Sugoi or Bomet or Kericho fighting each other? What has become of you KIKUYUS? And three, if a whole deputy president can announce the results of a by-election on Twitter 24 hours before the official results are announced, what will he do when he's running for president? What if he declares himself president before elections are announced and swears himself in? Dear Kenyans, we are being conditioned for a war and we don't know it. The narratives of rigging, deep state, mambo kwa ground different are constructed to divide a wedge between Kenyans. And if we do not take care, all the 1 trillion shilling investment UHURU has made in the last 8 years will vamoose. The ports, the roads, your assets and savings will mean nothing if we go to war. If we don't arrest this and rest early, God forbid, we will look like Syria. And maybe this time round, KIKUYUS will start it on behalf of the new cult leader.
Wow.
I'll just swallow that and not think about it too hard, because I think you're painting a very, very tough and grim picture. And I think today I'll be a bit on the preachy side. Let me look for the light, a little bit of light, in my analysis of the headlines. So bear with me. According to the Standard, because the president lost, he's angry. In the Daily Nation, he's having a bad day. And in the Star, he's facing a revolt. Well, quoting Hollywood, maybe for Kenyans, this is as good as it gets. Aristotle said that man is a political animal, and it appears that Kenyans are the super version of political animals. They are as political as they come. So if politics is the highest we as Kenyans can strive for, then political victory is really as good as it gets. If our aspirations are limited to who wins in the next election, and that election is not even a national election, but a by-election, then I'm sorry to say that our lives are pretty thin. Our loyalties will be with whoever wins politically, and politics will degenerate into a blood sport rather than a civil conversation about how we should govern ourselves and who should do it. And because we would have made elections such high stakes, winner take all affairs, there will be no room for compromise. Only one side can or will be able to win in this zero-sum game. Unfortunately, this way of thinking will only breed intolerance, division, and conflict on all sides of the political divide, just as 2M has said. But there are 3 instances when Kenyan politics has attempted to reach a compromise. One, with the expansion of the executive after the 2007 election through the Kofi Annan process. The second time was through the handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. And the third is through the proposals in BBI to take us back to the 2007-2008 compromise. Now, in 2014, Professor Mutahi Ngunyi said, constitutions are made in times of crisis. And if they're made without a crisis, they precipitate a crisis. The crisis of 2007-2008 led us to the Matatu presidency compromise, continuing to insist on the winner two-man take-all presidency will lead us to another crisis.
Well said.
Correct.
Well put.
Correct.
So let me also look to the light as I see it. And it's the big untold story of this administration. It will be just how connected Kenya has become, not only from within, but to the region and the rest of Africa.
Yeah.
Uhuru Kenyatta brought together a management framework for ports, railway and pipeline services under the Industrial Commercial Development Corporation, also known as the ICDC.
Correct.
I want to focus on the port especially today because the first ship, MV Carmel, docked on the newly commissioned port of Lamu.
Yes.
This is 49 years after this idea was first proposed in 1972 under his father's regime.
Absolutely.
The aim was to open up Kenya's largely undeveloped frontier by creating a transport corridor through Garissa, Isiolo, Maralal, Lodwar, and Lokichogio to the border with South Sudan, with a branch off at Isiolo to Moyale with the border town with Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So Uhuru has invested about 310 billion Kenya shillings to complete phase 1 of this mission.
Yeah.
And the new port has the capacity to handle bigger vessels.
Yes.
Kenya can now compete for the transshipment market from Djibouti and South Africa.
Yeah.
Now, transshipment is important because larger vessels, which carry significantly more containers and cargo than smaller vessels, sometimes cannot berth at small ports.
Yes.
So transshipment is the most effective way of shipping, as your cargo can be placed into the smaller vessel to reach its final destination. This administration has succeeded in creating a chain linking effect so that each project is always connected to another that adds value. So for instance, the Port of Lamu is part of the Lapsset corridor. The corridor comprises of the SGR line, which was completed. And then you have roads such as the Lamu-Garissa highway that are being constructed and are improving hinterland connections. The Lamu port also connects to oil pipelines and refineries in Isiolo and Lamu, as well as international airports in Isiolo and Lokichogio. Yes. In tandem with the Lamu port is the increased and improved capacity of the port of Mombasa.
Oh yes.
As we speak, Kenya is ranked 5 out of Africa's in Africa's top 20 ports in Africa. Sorry. Yeah. And so when Uhuru came into power in 2013, Mombasa port capacity was 22.31 million tons. Now this has risen to around 34 million tons.
Yes.
And in 10 years, the port will be able to handle about 47 million tons.
Yes.
Smaller ports have not been left out. KPA, Kenya Ports Authority, is expanding into Shimoni, the Shimoni port to cater to rising coastal trade volumes from Pemba Island and Zanzibar. Yeah. And the port is primed to serve as an industrial fishing facility. It's smaller, it's not forgotten. And beyond the coastal ports, there are dry inland ports. Yes. There's Nairobi and there's Naivasha, both linked by SGR and new roads. To the western side, there's been the revival of the port of Kisumu that began in 2018. Goodness. The port of Kisumu offers organized shipping services on Lake Victoria. Yeah. It's an important hub for the East African community that's trading to Uganda, DRC, and this port is then chain linked to the newly done Nakuru Kisumu MGR branch line, which was unused since 2008 and is about to be operational this November. This is what 2M is talking about when we say a little political instability will surely ruin such great investments.
And the whole network. Exactly. Remember that when Kenya sneezes, the whole of East Africa will catch a cold.
And you know what, guys, Lamu Port was actually built by our own taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
No loan, nothing.
Right. So let's protect our assets. Or let's be forward thinking. With that, we have a 3-part criteria that we normally use. We ask ourselves, is the headlines topical or speculative? Are they repetitive or groundbreaking? Are they thoughtful or just plain lazy? I think they were a little bit on the lazy side.
We would throw all of them.
It's completely. we chuck them all.
Chuck them.
There we go. No winning headline for today.
And now, our final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled The Third Industrial Revolution: How Lateral Power is Transforming Energy and the Economy and the World.
Who's it by?
Jeremy
by
Rifkin.
By Jeremy Rifkin. Sorry, I forgot.
No problem. The great economic revolutions in history occurred when new communication technologies converged with new energy systems. And according to the author of the book, new energy regimes make possible the creation of new or reinvented economic activities and expand commercial exchange. The accompanying communication revolutions become the means to organize and manage the new dynamics that emerge from those energy systems. In the first industrial revolution, steam-powered print technology became the communication medium to manage the coal-fired railway infrastructure. In the second industrial revolution, electronic communications, that is from the telephone, the radio, and television, became the communication medium to manage and market the oil-powered auto age and the mass consumer culture. But global oil and fossil fuel supplies are dwindling, and the technologies made from and propelled by these fossil fuels have become outdated. What is the result? Global unemployment is rising, governments, businesses, and consumers are burdened with debt, and living standards are plummeting everywhere. So according to the author, though, there is still hope. Internet technology and renewable energy will merge to create a powerful new infrastructure for a third industrial revolution that will change the world. So when the third industrial revolution is in full swing, people will produce their own green energy in their homes, in their offices, and in their factories, and they will share it with each other in some sort of energy internet, just like how we now create and share information online. And this democratization of energy will bring with it a fundamental reordering of human relationships that will impact the way we conduct business, the way we govern society, the way we educate our children, and the way we engage in civic life. Now, personally, not to be a pessimist and a cynic, but this sounds pretty utopian to me. But then again, if Aldous Huxley's fictional dystopian version of the world is our current reality, then an energy internet shared, much like we share Wi-Fi, is also possible. And in 2006, Jeremy Rifkin, that's the author of today's book, began working with the leadership of the European Parliament in drafting what he called a Third Industrial Revolution Economic Development Plan. A year later, in 2007, the European Parliament issued a formal written declaration endorsing this Third Industrial Revolution as the long-term economic vision and roadmap for the EU. And this roadmap for the future, what they call Digital Europe, is now being implemented by various agencies within the European Commission, as well as a number of EU member states. Well, I have to agree. I definitely agree that the shift to renewable energy is necessary. But maybe I'll get on board with this author's idea of the revolution once I get and use a Tesla, fully electric with software updates.
That you can buy on Bitcoin.
That I can buy on Bitcoin.
With Bitcoin.
Yes, once I get around that I can update my car the same way I update my phone, then maybe I'll be okay.
I love it. I love it. Now, yesterday, I told you that the prime drivers of the first industrial revolution was innovation and credit. And the prime mover of the second industrial revolution was transport infrastructure, railroads and steamships. Now, Jeremy Rifkin has come up with 5 pillars, the prerequisites for the third industrial revolution so that it can happen. The first is shifting to renewable energy. Second, transforming the building stock of every continent into micro power plants to collect renewable energies on site. Third, deploying hydrogen and other storage technologies in every building and throughout the infrastructure to store intermittent energies. 4, using internet technology to transform the power grid of every continent into an energy sharing intergrid that acts just like the internet. When millions of buildings are generating a small amount of energy locally on site, they can sell surplus back to the grid and share electricity with their continental neighbors. And 5, transitioning the transport fleet to electric, plug-in and fuel cell vehicles that can buy and sell electricity on a smart continental interactive power grid. Now, if we were to extrapolate these pillars to our Kenyan situation, where are we? 1, Kenya is on the way to actualizing a full shift to renewable energy. Over 70% of this country's energy needs come from renewable sources, wind, geothermal, solar, and that's what's probably powering your home. And UHURU is actually responsible for that. Second, UHURU is implementing a plan to install small solar power plants. The first solar power plant built was a beautiful 50 megawatt power plant in Garissa. In fact, UHURU has nearly doubled Kenya's total national grid in just 8 years. Kenya has an installed capacity of 2,600 megawatts. In 2013, we only had 1,500 megawatts of power. Can you imagine, from the 1900s to 2013, we only had managed to install 1,500 megawatts? And guess what? Kenya is one of the most connected countries connected to electricity in Africa. Nearly 80% of Kenyans are connected to power, up from 44% in 2013. Actually, Kenya has a higher per capita power consumption of 178 kilowatts compared to 126 kilowatts in Nigeria, which has a per capita GDP nearly 3 times higher than ours. Number 3, Kenya Power will this year begin laying fiber optic cables on power line infrastructure. What we're basically basically integrating power supply and internet services. Kenya Power will install 600 kilometers of fiber optic cable this year along its power lines. What are we saying in short? If you are to complete the third industrial revolution, Kenya is 60% there. And then you'll hear some dimwits like that red-rimmed mental case say that UHURU has not worked. Washindwe kabisa.
Who is that you've abused? So I really enjoyed this book. I liked his ideas on the third industrial revolution. I just wondered, and I'm glad that you talked about it too, how far Africa is from it.
Oh, yeah.
I think the interesting thing is that we are still heavily reliant on fossil fuels, right? Yeah. That are scarce and sort of placed in these restricted sort of areas. So how distributable renewable energies are on a big scale, I worry for Africa.
Oh, yeah.
Or how we're able to harness it so that it can benefit most Kenyans, absolutely. I also worry about.
Yeah.
But I did like the idea of this new lateral energy regime, as Jeremy calls it. And he says that we've moved from the first and the second industrial revolution, where it was very top-down, very, what's the word, capitalized, very selfish. And he calls it the adversarial relationship between sellers and buyers, has now been replaced in the third industrial revolution with a more collaborative economy. And this is one in which, there's more sharing. There's a new focus, they say, on, there's a new focus, not on self-interest, but on sort of social entrepreneurship and things like that. And he says that there's this new focus on transparency over secrecy is important because it's based on the premise that adding value to the network doesn't depreciate your own stock, which I quite like. And he gives the example of how we used to all use the encyclopedia called the Britannica. Or Encarta. I don't know if you guys remember.
I do.
And it traditionally paid academics. It was very exclusive, and there was like an extensive set of facts, but it was in these hardbook covers. And then he says that they were never able to imagine something like Wikipedia coming along. So allow me to make the case for Wikipedia. Ignore the judges that used Wikipedia a week ago. But he says that 20 years ago, the very idea that hundreds of thousands of professionals and amateur scholars from all over the world would collaborate with one another to create academic and popular essays on virtually every conceivable topic in the world without pay and make it available to everyone on the internet is amazing. And I think most of us have stumbled upon Wikipedia just Googling something very quickly. It tells you, the chronological sequence of things, where things came from, the ideas from which they originated from. It's quite useful. And today, or rather, by the time this book was being written, it said Wikipedia is the 8th most visited site on the internet, attracting around 13% of internet visitors every day. But what else I liked about this is this idea of Creative Commons, the open source platforms that have come up. The idea that you can now innovate based on somebody else's innovation just by having this data open for everybody on the internet. I think that's how Africa has been able to catch up to the rest of the world and continues to perhaps leapfrog in some areas. The other thing I liked about the idea of the third industrial revolution is reinventing the way we do business. And he talks about the rise of the social entrepreneur. And he gives an example of a company called Tom's. Tom's make these really cool shoes that are sustainable, organic, recycled, perhaps even from vegan material. But the idea is that when you buy a shoe, this Tom shoe, they donate an equivalent shoe to a child of need. This is Haiti, Guatemala, even America, Ethiopia, Rwanda, wherever. But wherever a child needs a shoe, they do it. But the idea here is that you're doing things for impact, not just for the bottom line, but for the greater good of society. So if that's where we're shifting, I'm all for it. They also talked about 3D printing really quickly. The idea that before you could manufacture, you had to put in so much investment. It was you had to hire all these people, you have labor lines and all that stuff. But now with a 3D printer, you can quickly manufacture things from where you are on site with less materials. So I look forward to this
third industrial revolution
that we happen to be in.
I think we need to ship this book to some residents in Karen. Because, I mean, we're talking about energy, we're talking about all these technologies, I mean, talking about Amazon and all this stuff. I just cannot see where wheelbarrows plug in.
Well, on a different note, I feel like the 3 industrial revolutions that we've covered this week have taken a sort of full circle. So if I could say, like, the British Industrial Revolution, that one, the first industrial revolution centered in Britain, was kind of accidental. They had run out of wood, so they turned to coal. I feel like the second industrial revolution centered in America was more state-driven. They wanted to move, they wanted to change their country, they had an opportunity that had opened up because they'd finished the Civil War, they had more territory, they had oil, so they pushed it and they created things that we are now undoing. So like, for instance, with a 3D printer, you take away the assembly line that Ford came up with, and now instead of having people do one task to complete a whole project, you can print out a whole house. And we are taking back from the government and democratizing industrialization, if
I like
call
that.
it like
that. I think we can end on that.
This is the best final thought ever. I really want Karen people to sum this book.
The Gospel According to 2M. So guys, on a day when we had no winning headlines, but I do want you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Parent Retail, and Starters. Have a lovely evening.